Emotional algebra, where the heart meets the math. What is integral is derivative as you figure out your path. Power plus emotions equals more than you can see. Listening to the wisdom.
Welcome to Emotional Algebra with Dr. E. Emotional Algebra is a podcast that helps listeners to understand the subtle calculations people make every day in their relationships with others, and explores the known and unknown variables that affect interactions in our everyday lives. It's a podcast to help us all become better people. I'm Andrew Tavani, your co-host.
And I'm Dr. E.
Hey, Dr. E. How you doing today? Good to see you.
I'm good.
Actually,
Andrew.
Dr. E, what is that you're wearing? Are you wearing some merch here? Is that what I see?
We have merch. Yes.
Oh, how about that?
Now, my daughter, for my birthday, she thought it'd be pretty cool to tie in something to the podcast. She's been seeing me work on and develop since January. So she thought it'd be pretty cool to bring that in. It was a big surprise. She was really proud of it. And I was really impressed with her efforts to go ahead. And she kept saying, "Send me the logo, Dad, send me the logo." So she had this delivered. But again, even that, I remember in our first episode, I talked about why I developed that to challenge a friend. And I also talked to my daughter about it, because I know sometimes we all have issues where we get caught in our fears. And I also then explained to her, I said, I'm doing this to help this person. I'm doing this to help you. And most of all, I'm doing it because I think it can make a difference. And I think even though with a lot of times our kids, we might say things and plant seeds and scratch that soil and drop that seed in, we don't always see it grow. And I think the thing to see is that she wasn't going to necessarily tell me, "Wow, that's awesome, Dad." But obviously from her efforts in this, she thought it was pretty awesome. So I think that's where we want to realize our kids aren't always going to show us the things that we want to see, whereas it doesn't mean we're not making an impression on them, even for behaviors that we might not want to engage in. I think that's also something to look at too.
Yeah. Always something to consider there. That we talk about right in the open, the known and the unknown factors. So it sounds like sort of an unknown factor until you got the present there, which is great. And my birthday's still a while off, but if you want to let her know,
right?
I'm a medium. I'm an adult medium.
That sounds good. I'll get that one in the hopper. Maybe by then we'll have silk screen.
That's right. Okay, sounds good. Dr. E, last episode, we touched on a lot of new topics. One thing we discussed pretty much in depth was conflict escalation. We talked about the dichotomy, the strong versus weak, and ultimately the win-lose dichotomy and all the emotions that go into that. I think probably makes sense to just quickly review that, since a lot of what we're going to cover in today's episode is based on that.
Right. So again, as we're kind of looking at the last part of this slide, the last piece of it, we're looking at kind of the culmination of conflict. We're looking at the emotions and how we view them as strong and weak, and by cultural standards, and also remembering the ones that overlap: love, happy, compassion, trust. That's not on there. I got to make sure I put that on there. And I've had that on there. I've had this presentation for years. However, there are thousands of emotions that we have. And what we want to recognize is the unique differences between those, especially in conflict. Because while I show the graph, and on the graph, we see that escalation of what are behaviors that often look strong, what you're seeing underneath that are the emotions that we feel that feel weak. So we don't want to show the weak, so we react with emotions and behaviors that help us to look stronger, starting maybe with, we talked about logical defenses or cognitive defenses: rationalization, minimization, denial, justification. Then we might move to our first protective emotions like flippancy, defiance, arrogance, some of those emotions. And as we continue to get pushed, then we escalate to anger, then to rage and to hatred. So why I address those is to help people realize that, again, there's this inverse proportional relationship between, and I love saying this, between the degree of emotions that look strong and the emotions we feel underneath that feel weak. So that's the one thing to gauge, is if the conflict's getting out of hand really quickly, then what we want to look at is, what is that person feeling? Even if the first thing I say to somebody and they blow up, then their pump is primed. And that's what I really want people to see, is while this is a conflict that's shown that starts from a point of, kind of the midpoint, or what I'm hoping to be the point of resolution, when people can find, the understanding or medium for what's going on, and communicate better. The thing to realize is, many times people are starting way down at the bottom of that graph. They're starting on that lower on that axis of power, from low power. And then they just react from there, because the goal is to try to get our power back. Conflicts just aren't about understanding. They're not about resolution. They're not about let's meet in the middle. They're about, I have to win, and I have to, in essence, if not survive, then crush and conquer. And that's what I really want people to look at, is how our conflicts are coming these days, to really crushing and conquering, and then the other person basically having to submit. And that, to me, is basically part of this pandemic of conflict that we have in the world around us right now.
And I think one of the enlightening things you pointed out yesterday too is, it's not just the verbal, it's the nonverbal, the body language, even before some of these conflicts officially kick off, let's say.
Right. And that is key, is that I was saying that, whether it's a facial expression, a micro emotion, coming, the way somebody presents themselves in a room, or just even somebody knowing that they're going to have to talk to somebody that there's contention with, that's remained unresolved. I often tell people their conflicts start years before, the fight, that there's so many things that happen over time that build and build and build. And people are like, well, where'd that come from? And that's what I'm trying to say is, body language, the history of experiences. And that's what we're going to get into in the self-development stuff, is really understanding all the things that lead to our behaviors in the present and where they come from. So today, then people will be able to go back and review the conflict, either go back and watch the episode, or just kind of review what we talked about in review it in your head and try to remember. But then look at this graphical kind of interface and try to play out those conflicts in your own life. Look at the precursors to it. Look at the triggers that brought it on. Look at what happened in the end, and ask yourself, did I really find a resolution? Are this person and I that much closer truly? Or did we just kind of, put things under the rug again? And I think a lot of times people do need professional help to work through conflicts. That's why there's so many mediators that are employed these days. And even our jury and legal system is really about helping to manage conflict in court of law, and saying, you're innocent or guilty. The issue I don't like about those situations is that often it's levying all guilt, all responsibility, rather than a shared balance, which is really often the case, is there's a shared balance to conflicts, that if we all understand and look at our role we played, the role that other people's played, the role that my opponent's playing, and we look and say, okay, how can we understand this from the emotional standpoint, from the behavioral standpoint, from the predispositions and the triggers, then we'd often find a much more satisfying outcome for everybody, where we can really seek resolution and understanding.
Absolutely. And I think too, one of the great things, as you always do, you come with visuals, and you've got those visuals. And I think that it's a great opportunity for our viewers and listeners. If you're not viewing, you might want to turn on real quick. We just put it back up. Take a screenshot of this. This is a great tool to use as just your notes to understand the emotions and what side they line up on in any conflict. So let's talk about how this is all going to fuel what we're going to discuss today, which is some conscious and unconscious experiences.
Right. So today we're going to talk about development of self, basically our conscious, unconscious, our defenses, and how that all comes together. So as a listener, I'll try to continue to explain what's going up on the presentation here. Even as a listener, if this is a lot, there's a lot that's going to be covered, and just like yesterday, in a short amount of time, sometimes it's hard to hear. Please go home. You'll see this on your different platforms, YouTube or Spotify. different platforms that carry the video. I welcome you all again to review this and even go back with people you're having to struggle with, and let them take a look at it with you. So basically, when we come to this world or born, to me, we come as just, I equate it to a sphere of energy. We're just a ball of energy. And that ball of energy is consciousness. Our conscious mind's job is present oriented. So what I mean by that is that it's looking at what's going on in the present. Do I feel tired? Do I feel hungry? Do I feel afraid? What is my experience? So it is going to look at the present moment to decide, what do I need to do? So now, as we have experiences in life, each of those experiences becomes like a different ball. So what I'm showing for the listener, I have this big circle or sphere that has all of these smaller circles popping up inside of it. Each of those smaller circles and different color circles denote a different experience that came with different emotions, that over time we have more and more experiences. Well, what do we want to do in life as humans but make meaning of it? So often what we end up doing is we start to organize those different experiences and different emotions into what I call belief systems and attitudes. Okay. So the thing to understand is, how do we parse this energy? How are we taking from the whole and shifting and affecting our perception of our outside world and our inside world and bringing them kind of together to make these conscious decisions? So over time, what happens is we develop more stronger barriers or boundaries between our conscious mind and our unconscious. Why? So that our unconscious can hold what it holds all inside, and the conscious mind wants to pick and choose what it calls on to deal with the present. So in the longer run, the person is making assessments of the past and comparing them with appraisals of the future to make decisions in the present.
And Dr. E, let me just stop you for 1 second. The difference between conscious and unconscious. Unconscious is this, I'm looking at the visual and it almost looks like a painter's palette. It's the palette of experiences you've undergone in life. But maybe it's not all some things that you remember. Is that kind of what you're suggesting here?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, there's so many situations here that go on that we really don't remember, and yet still are influences in our behaviors. And that's really one of the keys to understand, is this is the most important part of our emotional algebra, is what all goes into our behaviors. Now, how do we categorize these experiences? But we go back to our dichotomies. We look at those experiences being good or bad, right or wrong, or strong or weak. And that's then how we start to put those emotions, events, experiences into those belief systems. Now, one thing that I'm not easily able to graphically show, I can do it by drawing on a board a lot more easily, is to show the overlap between different belief systems and sharing common experiences. So let's say that I have belief systems about my experiences with men. And one of my belief systems about men is that they've been tough on me, or they were mean to me, or I got bullied as a kid, and then I got bullied by a boss or a professor or something in my life that occurred. Now that's one belief system I have about men. Now let's say I also now have a belief system about fear and the times I felt bullied or pushed around or intimidated, whether it was by men or women. I'm going to overlap some of those belief systems, some of those memories and experiences in that belief system of my fear of conflict in certain situations, and then my situations with men. And then I might have a belief system that says, no, this is when I defend myself. This is when I'm not going to take anymore because of this and this and this and this. That promotes maybe an anger, a defiance, and maybe being pushed, and I can justify rage. So over time, as the conscious mind is continuing to develop and the unconscious mind is becoming the storehouse for all these events and developing, what we have to look at is the complex interaction between these, because it's not cut and dry. And people often want to make dichotomous choices or decisions of, well, this is good or bad, this is right or wrong, this is strong or weak. And I think it's really important to understand the complexity of these issues, because like I said, this is now where we're getting truly into those quantities inside of the quantities, and now looking at the interactions between the variables in our emotional algebra. Are the experiences additive? Are they multiplicative? Do they feel exponential? Though to those degrees, which are then going to drive our behavior so much.
Dr. E, why do we forget certain experiences that are significant enough to still influence our lives on a daily basis versus other experiences that we definitely remember? Is there a reason that we end up in these situations where so much is unconscious yet still influencing our lives?
Well, I think there's a lot. I mean, first of all, there's different theories of forgetting, whether it be primacy or or recency effects, or in terms of why we remember things we do and how to affect our behaviors. But also we have those theories that say, well, we get so much information, it kind of falls off the edge. It falls off the edge. Time sometimes is a variable, but also we got to look at things that are called motivated forgetting. Some people forget issues, fully forget those issues or events because psychologically it was too much to remember. People will repress memories. They'll suppress memories. They'll have, buried memories that are in there that through some of the work that I do with people, sometimes these memories are coming up and out that have been in there for a long time. We're also going to influence our memories by our belief systems. And that's where these belief systems and attitude systems that we're showing with the circles with all the smaller circles inside. So a belief system would denote an experience that has, a larger circle with a number of different experiences that come with a number of different, either similar attitudes, beliefs, or outcomes inside. That's where we're going to look at that. That's where it can become complex, is understanding that. Now, as we feel that things are bad and wrong and weak, I look at this as energy, and I look at this, and I'm going to go kind of the simplicity of physics. I look at it that often people wish they could destroy experiences that they feel are bad or wrong and weak. They can't. So what we do is we try to put it in as far back in our unconscious as we can. And then as we feel those experiences, like, ooh, I don't like that. So we cut it off. The issue is, now let's go to another idea of physics, is once an object is placed in motion, it remains in motion until acted upon by an equal and opposite force. So if I have all these emotions in my experience and they've been put in motion by an experience, I always say it's kind of like it happens in a non-gravitational space. So if I ping that emotion, it is going to resonate forever until an equal and opposite force to that emotion comes into play. So that's a lot to chew on there, Andrew. What are your thoughts on what I'm presenting?
Dr. E, you're dropping the hardcore science on us, the law of conservation of energy. I haven't heard that one since high school, but no, that's all interesting, and certainly explains a lot of why people behave the way they do. Unresolved. I'm thinking unresolved emotions almost is what it sounds like what you're saying. Do I have that right?
Well, yeah. And it's, how do we manage those? So the next thing that we want to look at is what the conscious mind wants to do is minimize interference from experiences that don't help with that person's presentation of their ideal self. So you remember we talked about the real, feel, and ideal selves. Well, this is where all the pieces that I've been presenting through all these previous episodes are really coming to fruition through this presentation today, because it brings together the ways we look at power, because we realize we've recreated that power hierarchy within ourselves. It talks about our real, feel, and ideal self. It's talking about the ways we might view ourselves as victims, persecutors, rescuers. And how does that fit with our conscious mind's view of self? Well, since we see most emotions as bad and or wrong and or weak, what does our conscious mind learn to do? It becomes logic-based. Because remember from the last episode, we said, if I'm thinking, I'm not feeling. If I'm not feeling, I don't hurt. If I don't hurt, then you can't hurt me. If you can't hurt me, I can't lose. And if I can't lose, then I must win. So the thing to look at here is that we learn to try to use logic, because we're taught that if we can reason through the world, then everything's going to be okay. Emotions in our hierarchical world do not make sense. So that's why we're often trying to eliminate emotion. And we think if I can look logical, then I look good. But what happens is we filter our logic through our emotions. Arrogance is a false pride. It's pride trying to present this supreme, superior, logical look. And then we have defiance. Defiance isn't necessarily an outward show of anger yet. It's a precursor to that, but it's saying, no, you can't have my power. And I'm going to look superior than you because I'm not going to react. And flippancy says, I don't care. So again, all these things we're trying to do to preserve our sense of self, our sense of power, and our conscious mind is trying to often scramble, say, how do I maintain control? How do I can do that? So what the next thing the conscious mind does is it develops defenses. What do those defenses do? The defenses insulate our conscious mind from the inside world, from our unconscious and all the noise that it starts to feel inside to try to affect its decisions and pick and choose what it wants without all this other noise interfering. And/or it's also trying to protect ourselves and our perception of the outside world. This is why people can have two totally different views of the same experience, because their defenses are coloring. It's the lens we look at the world with, and also our conscious mind from our own, again, experiences, attitudes, beliefs, perceptions is going to be coloring the way we're going to perceive that experience.
Now, Dr. E, as you're explaining all this, I'm reminded of a memorable Pearl Jam lyric. I don't want to think, I want to feel. So is it better to think or is it better to feel?
You've just created a hierarchical issue there. Because you're saying better than. What is it better to do? And I think what we're going to look at is the value of all experiences. That, like I said, in an equitable world, an equity world, emotions make sense. Emotions are purposeful. Emotions have reason. And that's where when we separate and we assume that logic is better than emotion, or some emotions are better than other emotions, or people who are more emotional are better than others, we're again filtering that through a lens that's not going to help us to see the whole spectrum. I think what we're going to do is to really see, that full spectrum rainbow of emotions, not just black and white, night or day, cold or hot, if we want to go to all those different dichotomies that we might use even to describe people's behaviors, actions, emotions. So this is the key, is to really see that we've used so many reference in our world to create these comparisons to help us to make decisions that really contribute to more blindness, not more understanding.
Okay, so think and feel, and try to get the right balance of the two. So
right, and think and process, why am I feeling and how many emotions? No experience to me that we have comes with only a singular emotion. And that's what we understand is often people will say, you made me angry. And I think we talked about this before. I said, well, let's back up before that. What is anger protecting? Well, I felt disrespected. Okay, and when you felt disrespected, what happened to your power? Well, it went down. Okay, then what else did you feel? Well, I felt sad. I felt afraid they might continue to push this. And I felt with disrespected, I felt kind of embarrassed because they said that in front of other people and somebody laughed. So I felt humiliated. So again, what we're now getting into is the emotional specificity, the unique nature of each individual emotion, that since most emotions or most conflicts feel overwhelming to people, often they just want to back up, avoid, run away. The conscious mind wants to either hunker down or they want to shut it down. And that's what we want to look at, that often that's where our defenses come into play. So our first line of defenses are going to be cognitive defenses: rationalization, justification, minimization, denial, projection, all those things that that Freud and a lot of people in psychodynamic theory brought up, and others beyond that. Then what's going to happen is we depending on our age, we might move to emotional defenses. So before we can really use logic, when we're little kids, often what do we use as our defenses? Defiance. We might use anger. Kids might have tantrums. They get to the point of rage or hatred. I hate you. Now, in our culture, again, like I said, we've called these emotions bad and wrong, but strong. So when we get into these different delineations, we're not really teaching people how to use emotions. we're telling them to control them. And control is an illusion that's based in fear. Most of the way that we handle conflicts is really about control and having power over, not power with. And whenever I have that discussion of people in control, I'm always helping them to see that this issue that you're seeking control about is because you feel fear. No, I don't. Let's talk about that more. So again, it's about calming down and reacting and responding. So remembering that our defenses are going to escalate, going back to our discussion yesterday, and that escalation of conflict. The more you see that moving from maybe defiance or flippancy or sarcasm, then to anger, to rage, to hatred, you're seeing that increase in the expression of power. That's then it's trying to balance or countermand that decreasing in perception of internal power, the loss of power. And this is always going to be true. So like I said, even we have to look at people who behave in arrogant and or smug ways, that they're trying to control the dialogue. They're trying to intimidate their person. They're trying to use their intelligence to try to shut things down. How does that help with the mutual understanding? So again, these are things now that are driving us to understand where we're at hierarchically to trying to reach for equity.
So today's episode of Emotional Algebra with Dr. E went a little bit long. And what we decided to do was break it into 2 episodes. So in the next episode, we're going to pick it up right where we left off with Dr. E getting further into depth into these concepts of conscious behavior, unconscious behavior, defenses. It's really interesting stuff, and he's going to take you a little further into it. So as Dr. E says, see you next time.